So we had Louis Sullivan, an American architect. Here shows a timeline of some of his prominent works that we saw and that were recognized by landmarks and that we'll discuss today. So he was born on September 3rd, 1856 in Boston, Massachusetts. His parents, his dad was from Ireland and his mom was from Switzerland, and they both immigrated to the United States in the late 1840s, and that had an impact on his style because of their backgrounds. He had an older brother, but more importantly, he attended public school in the Boston area, and he spent his summers on his grandparents' farm, where he learned about nature, and that's where a lot of his inspiration came from. He would also spend his free time in Boston exploring the streets and looking at different buildings. He ended up graduating high school a year early, and then in September 1872, he entered the Massachusetts Institute of Technology at the age of 16 to study architecture. And this was because MIT had the first architecture school in the United States, which was founded in 1865. And additionally, he was able to bypass his first 2 years at MIT by passing a series of exams. So more about his inspiration. He accredits it to nature and his Irish heritage that he got from his mom. More specifically, he was inspired by the building of the Masonic Grand Lodge Temple in Boston, Massachusetts. He was also inspired by architect Henry Richardson and his design of the Brattle Square Church in Boston, Massachusetts. Another source of his inspiration was through the writings of...
Stop. We're not continuing until phones are in your backpack, which is a freshman thing. Your books are shut. There should be nobody on their computer. This is terrible. These are your classmates. Okay? We're not getting tested on this. You should not be taking notes. So obviously you're doing homework. Stop it and act like adults. I'm sorry. I really am sorry. Please continue.
So another source of his inspiration was through the writings of Thoreau and Whitman, which were our notable poets, writers, and philosophers of that time. So part of his early career was that he moved to Chicago in 1879, which following the event of the Great Chicago Fire, which happened in 1871 and which is noted as the worst disaster of the 19th century. He went to Chicago because to take part in the building boom that was going on at this time, and he worked under William LeBron Jenney, an architect that's credited with constructing the first steel frame building. But then less than a year later, he did move to Paris so he could study architecture. After 1 year of studying, he moved back to Philadelphia, and he did take a job with architect Frank Furness. However, the Depression of 1873 forced Furness to let him go, but he learned a lot of his, a lot of skills that he applied to his further architecture from him. In 1875, he returned to Chicago again, and he worked for the firm Joseph S. Houston and John Elderman, and he worked as a draftsman. Then in 1879, he left on his choosing and worked for Dankmar Elder. And then a year later, he became a partner in the firm. And then in the picture, you can see that's one of their stained glass and kind of their logo for the building. So overall, Elder and Sullivan, together, they were vastly different people that came together to create very memorable buildings that are recognized back then, but also today. They are seen as one of the greatest collaborations in American architects, and they were also among the leading professions in Chicago at their time. Together, they designed over 180 buildings, including residences, commercial and office buildings, theaters, hotels, railroad stations, even synagogues, churches, and tombs. Most of their buildings were in Chicago at this time, as the expansion of the 1880s resulted in this. And in their partnership, Elder worked as an engineering and designer, whereas Sullivan worked as a planner and more of the architect and more of the art and decoration of the building. So one of their main buildings, some of their design principles, specifically to Sullivan, was that he could be understood from his quote that form follows function, meaning that the shape of the building should primarily relate to its intended function and purpose. He was famous for his tripart skyscraper, which included the base level, followed by the next however many stories the building was that would all be the same, and they should be designed to look the same because they all ultimately serve the same function. And then at the top of the building would be the attic story in a distinct cornice line, which will mark endpoints and set it apart from the other buildings in the area. So this ultimately coincides with his fundamental concept of a base, a shaft, and a capital on his buildings. So his purpose of the skyscraper was to emphasize upward momentum. Other prominent features of his work that can be seen through his sketches are his use of masonry cladding, his semicircle arches, and his Art Nouveau and Celtic Revival decorations. So one of the famous buildings that they worked on, Sullivan and Elder, was the Chicago Auditorium building, which was a multi-use building completed in 1889, located in Chicago, Illinois. It was seen as one of their grandest accomplishments because it included a 4,300-seat auditorium, and it was seen that no seat in the auditorium was a bad seat, as you could see the stage from any angle in the building. There was an addition created in 1890, which consisted of 136 offices, a 400-room hotel, and a retail space, which ultimately grew the building. The building costed approximately $3.4 million at this time. It was famous for its use of modern technology to build it, but also its acoustical design inside. More importantly was its raft foundation. Because of the soil beneath, it was made of soft blue clay, making it virtually impossible to create a regular foundation. They had to use a floating mat of crisscross railroad ties with a double layer of steel rails embedded in concrete to provide more support for such a tall building that they wanted it to be in the end. So exterior features of this building are the large mass of itself, and then also the repetitive window design with its ornamentation pattern and its load-bearing stone walls on the lower levels. Within the interior, there are a lot of stained glass windows that Sullivan focused on and wanted to draw attention to. He also focused on his use of grand stairways, his mosaics, and his stencil detailing that he provided on not only the ceiling, but also the walls and the floors of the different rooms. Overall, he believed that the form of the building, including its decorations, its design, and its style, should arise from the function and the purpose of what the building would serve to meet, which was for grand events. So here we have a section of the auditorium which shows its different layers and the stage of it, and then we also have a floor plan of the stage and its seating.
Another one of his buildings that he designed was the Wainwright Building. He designed it in a neoclassical style. It is 10 stories high. It is embellished with terracotta. It has a tripart composition and is supported by a thin steel structure. The building is currently owned by the state of Missouri in the House of Offices. The building is made with a steel-thin skeleton that is known as Chicago and skyscraper construction. This style comes from the grid pattern that is represented through the equally spaced piers and windows on the exterior of the building. And here we have the location on the site, the elevations, and floor plans. Another building he designed was the Guarantee Building, also known as the Prudential Building. It was completed in 1986. It is located in Buffalo, New York, and it is made with a steel structure and is ornamented with terracotta blocks. There are 4 main sections to this building. The first section is the mechanical and utility space that is located in the basement. The second space is on the ground level and is the main public areas of the building. The third space of the building is where all the office spaces are located, and these office floors are identical floors that continue upward and are located around a centralized elevator. The last section consists of elevators, equipment, and more utility space. Here's the floor plan of the Guarantee Building.
So in the Panic of 1893 ultimately caused a financial crisis, which caused Elder's and Sullivan's partnership to dissolve and their firm to break up. So Sullivan went on to work on different buildings. He received a few large commissions, but also a few commissions for small-town Midwestern banks that he focused a lot on. He also wrote a couple of books to share his work, but also his inspiration and philosophy because it was so different at that time.
Another building he also designed was the Sullivan Center. It is located in Chicago, Illinois. It is a 3-stage plan, and he designed it as a 9-story plan, but they ended up choosing a 12-story plan. This 3-story stage plan that they had was so that when they would build one portion of the building and then they would work in it while the other 2 sections were being built. It has a steel frame structure. It has Chicago windows and a lot of ornamental work, and it has a corner entry. He ended up selling the building to H.G. Selfridge and Company. Then it was later released to Otto Young, and who then released it to Carson P. Scott in 1904. Sullivan wasn't able to finish this project, so Daniel Burnham and Company finished it in the intended style. The lower level is a public shopping space where the top levels house private office spaces. The steel frame structure allows for an increase in window space, which allowed for more natural light into the interior and allowed pedestrians walking by to see the merchant displays. One of the prominent features of this building was Chicago-style windows that includes an overhang, and the building has a rounded corner entry that is visible from all directions approaching the building. The building then was renovated in 2006. This is another floor plan of the building. Another building he designed was the National Farmers Bank. It is located in Ottawa, Minnesota. It was built in 1908. The detailing was done by George Elmes and is part of his jewel box bank design. It was remodeled in 1940 and is considered a National Historic Landmark. The bank was originally designed with red brick and green terracotta detailing along the street facades. The street-facing facades also include large half-circle stained glass windows that help bring in natural light along the building. Due to the renovation in 1940, many of the interior elements of the bank were destroyed. However, in more recent renovations, the bank has been restored and has more of its original interior features back. Here is more floor plans of the building. Another bank he designed was Merchants National Bank. It is located in Grinnell, Iowa. It was constructed in 1914. It is known for the oversized terracotta detailing on the front facade and for its large rose window on the front facade. He also puts great detail in the stained glass windows to help emphasize the natural lighting. The floor is covered with a pink marble finish, and the walls are covered halfway with brick. The counters are topped off with a bronze grille. Along the street facades are large stained glass windows that help with this natural lighting. And since the angle of the sun changes throughout the day, the mood inside the bank will change because it corresponds with the way the sun hits different colors of the stained glass along the windows. The rose window also helps with the changing of the bank mood, as well as it gives the bank a cathedral feeling. Here's more floor plans of the bank. All right, for his decline, his fortunes were starting to diminish because during this decline, his fortunes were diminishing, which caused both an emotional and physical decline on him. This caused him to be depressed and drink very heavily. This wasn't just due to his life as an architect, but also during this time he got married in 1990 to Margaret Hatzberg, and then they split. However, he wasn't actually divorced until 1916. He also started to grow apart from some of his family members, like his brother. And he ended up dying on April 14th, 1924 in Chicago, Illinois. He had no money, so Frank Lloyd Wright paid for his funeral.
So as part of his legacy, he is an AIA Gold Medal recipient, and this is because they attribute it to his enduring contribution to the theory and practice of architecture. He is also referred to as the father of skyscrapers, as he is credited with developing the aesthetics and dynamics of the first skyscrapers. He also is noted for his ornamental styles that he applied to his tall buildings, as they showed the upward momentum of buildings and showing how they were growing from being just 1- and 2-story options. He's seen as foreshadowing modernism and bringing the start of modernism to that age. He directly influenced Frank Lloyd Wright, and Frank Lloyd Wright attributes a lot of his abilities to what Louis Sullivan did. He also wrote an autobiography book that was just published before he passed away. It's called The Autobiography of an Idea, and it describes his design principles and theories, and discussed his life as an architecture, as he was very prominent about wanting his legacy to continue on and wanting other people to apply his theories to his work.
Here's a quote that sums up his design ideas. Sullivan's architectural goal was to create, in his words, architecture that will soon become a fine art in the best sense of the word, an art that will live because it will be of the people, for the people, and by the people. Here's our works cited in our synopsis.